What if I told you that true wealth has nothing to do with money, and that the most powerful man in the room is often the most broken? We're taught to believe that success is a fortress that protects us from pain, but for some, it's just a bigger, emptier cage. This story proves that the one thing that can truly save us isn't power or status, but a simple act of kindness from a past we thought we'd forgotten. Get ready for an emotional journey, because you are about to see what happens when a cleaning lady entered the estate and realized the owner was the boy she protected as a child, and he was about to remember everything. On one side, we have Frank Perkins, a cold and demanding millionaire who has everything he could ever want, yet is starving for something real in a life filled with superficiality and deceit. On the other, we have Cynthia Jordan, a humble cleaning lady with a quiet dignity, who carries a powerful secret past within her heart. Their two worlds are about to collide in the most unexpected way, proving that destiny has a funny way of bringing souls back together, whether they're ready for it or not. This is a story that will touch your soul and restore your faith in the power of human connection. Imagine being the owner of everything you can see from your penthouse window, yet feeling completely invisible. That was Frank's daily reality. He was surrounded by people who wanted a piece of his empire, but there was no one who truly saw the man behind the millionaire title. He had built walls so high to protect himself from the world's betrayals that had accidentally locked out any possibility of warmth. He thought what he needed was more control, but what his soul was truly screaming for was a connection to a past he didn't even know he was missing. Now put yourself in Cynthia's shoes for a moment. The vulnerable boy she once protected is now a powerful man who doesn't even give her a second glance. How does a simple cleaning lady remind a titan of industry of a childhood debt of kindness? To speak up would be to risk everything: her much-needed job, her quiet dignity, and the possibility of being humiliated by the very person she once saved. Her silence is her protection, but her secret past is a ticking clock. And destiny is about to force her hand with a plot twist neither of them could ever see coming. Before we dive into this incredible story of a love that transcends time and a redemption that will leave you breathless, do us a quick favor so we can continue bringing you stories like this. Let us know in the comments what beautiful city or town you're watching from right now. We love to see how far our stories travel. And don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new story, and share this video with one person you know who has a kind and beautiful heart. Well, isn't it funny how destiny plays its cards? On a Tuesday that felt like any other, Cynthia Jordan walked through gates so grand they could have guarded a kingdom, not just a home. She was, for all intents and purposes, just another cleaning lady, there to make a living. The marble floors gleamed under her worn-out sneakers, each step echoing in the cathedral-like silence of the mansion. She couldn't help but feel a little small, a little out of place, but a job was a job, and Lord knows she needed this one. It was a chance for a fresh start, a quiet life. She was given a simple tour, a list of duties longer than her arm, and a crisp, soulless uniform. It felt like putting on a costume, hiding the woman with a secret past behind a name tag. Cynthia clutched her cleaning cart like a shield, the squeak of its wheels the only sound accompanying her through hallways lined with art she was too intimidated to truly look at. Each portrait seemed to stare down at her, silently questioning her presence. This wasn't just a house, it was a monument to success, a world away from her own humble existence. The housekeeper, a stern woman with a face that had forgotten how to smile, led her to the master study. Mr. Perkins is extremely particular about this room. Do not touch anything on his desk unless it is to dust around it. The warning hung in the air, heavy and cold. Cynthia simply nodded, her gaze sweeping over the vast, mahogany desk, the leather-bound books, and the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked a garden so perfect it seemed fake. It was the office of a king, a powerful owner. And then he walked in. He didn't stride, he commanded the space, his presence sucking the very air out of the room. He was tall, dressed in a suit so sharp it could cut glass, with eyes that held the chilling emptiness of a winter sky. He was the millionaire, the master of this universe, and he didn't even glance in her direction. For him, she was just a part of the furniture, another faceless employee. His voice was clipped, dismissive, as he spoke to the housekeeper about a business call. But Cynthia heard more than the words. She heard the echo of a boy's trembled breathing from long ago. Her heart stopped, caught in her throat like a startled bird. The world tilted on its axis as she truly looked at his face, past the hardened jaw and the cold facade. Underneath the power and the money, it was him. It was little Frank Perkins, the boy whose lunch money she'd saved, the boy she had protected from the cruel taunts of bullies in the schoolyard. He was the lonely child she remembered. Her mind reeled, a whirlwind of forgotten moments and a shared secret past she thought was buried forever. The powerful owner of this grand estate was the vulnerable boy she had once shielded with her own small body. A wave of emotion, so potent it almost buckled her knees, washed over her. He was right there, a ghost from a life she had left behind, and he looked straight through her without a flicker of recognition. It was a heartaching and cruel twist of fate, a story that felt both impossible and inevitable. You see, the man Frank Perkins had become was a fortress of his own making. He was a millionaire, yes, but he paid for his fortune with a currency of solitude. From his penthouse office, he saw people as assets or liabilities, pieces on a chessboard he controlled with ruthless precision. The staff were merely cogs in the well-oiled machine of his life, their faces blurring into a sea of uniforms. He demanded perfection, not because he was a perfectionist, but because it was easier than demanding connection, a concept had long since discarded. To him, Cynthia Jordan was nothing more than the new cleaning lady. Had approved her hiring from a list, a name on a page, and now she was a fleeting presence in his periphery. He wouldn't notice her quiet grace or the thoughtful way she worked. He only noticed if a surface was dusty or a window smudged. That was the extent of her reality in his world. Their shared secret past was a book written in a language he had completely forgotten how to read, gathering dust in a locked room of his memory. His days were a monotonous parade of high-stakes meetings, empty handshakes, and dinners with people who wanted something from him. He was the owner of a vast empire, yet he possessed nothing that truly mattered. The silence in his mansion was a testament to his isolation, a void that no amount of money could fill. He mistook efficiency for loyalty and obedience for friendship, building his walls higher with every successful deal. He had everyone's respect but no one's genuine affection. There was a profound, almost tragic irony in it all. The boy who was once so desperate for a friend was now a man who pushed everyone away. He had protected himself from the pain of the world by becoming impenetrable, but in doing so, had also locked out any chance of joy. Cynthia Jordan, the one person in that entire estate who knew the real him, was rendered invisible by the very uniform meant to signify her role. It was a heartaching and cruel paradox of destiny. He would walk past her in the hallway, his mind on stock prices and corporate takeovers, while her heart would ache with the weight of what she knew. He was so close, yet a million miles away. Frank had become a master of the universe, but a stranger to himself. The demanding millionaire had everything he could ever want, but he had lost the one thing he truly needed: a connection to the boy he once was, the boy who needed protecting. And so his obliviousness wasn't malicious, it was a symptom of his lonely existence. He saw a cleaning lady, but he couldn't see the keeper of his most vulnerable memories. He saw a servant, not a savior. This profound disconnect was the chasm between them, a gap that seemed impossible to bridge. How could she ever reach the lonely child trapped inside this cold, powerful man if he refused to even see the woman standing before him? Cynthia quickly learned that the grand mansion wasn't a home, it was a stage. Every evening, a cast of characters would appear, business partners with predatory smiles, Socialites draped in jewels and insincerity, all of them orbiting Frank Perkins. They laughed at his jokes a little too loudly and agreed with his opinions a little too quickly. From the shadows while polishing silver or wiping down counters, Cynthia observed this hollow theater. It was a life of glittering emptiness, and it was deeply emotional to witness. Her heart ached for him, not the millionaire owner, but for the ghost of the boy she remembered. She saw glimpses of him in the flicker of exhaustion in Frank's eyes when he thought no one was watching. She saw the lonely child in the way head stare out the window at the rain, completely disconnected from the soulless party happening behind him. The world saw a titan of industry. She saw a lost soul who had been protected once but was now utterly exposed to a different kind of predator. These people didn't know him. They didn't know about his fear of thunderstorms, or the way he used to doodle rockets on his notebooks, dreaming of escape. They saw his wealth, his power, his Namia brand to be associated with. Cynthia, the humble cleaning lady, was the only one in that entire estate who knew the contents of his heart, or at least the heart he used to have. This secret past felt like a sacred trust she had to honor, even in silence. Shed watched them praise his ruthlessness in business, a quality they admired, but Cynthia remembered a boy who cried when he accidentally stepped on a snail. When had he traded that empathy for ambition? The kindness he once possessed seemed to be buried under layers of cynical success. It was a slow, heart-aching tragedy, and she was the sole audience to the quiet decay of a good soul. Her love story with the past was one of grief for what was lost. It wasn't pity she felt, but a profound and painful empathy. She understood, perhaps better than anyone, that the cruelest bullies don't always steal your lunch money. Sometimes they steal your soul, piece by piece, until you forget who you were meant to be. Frank had built a fortress to keep the bullies out, but had accidentally trapped himself inside with ghosts far more menacing. He was a prisoner in his own perfect life. And so, a quiet resolve began to form in her heart. It wasn't about revealing herself or reclaiming a long-lost friendship. It was simpler, purer than that. She felt a deep, instinctual need to protect the memory of that boy, to be a silent guardian of the kindness he had lost. She didn't know how, but she knew her presence in that house was no accident. Destiny had brought her here for a reason, and it was about to be tested. The staff meetings at the Perkins estate were as sterile as a surgeon's table, with Frank presiding like a king holding court. He demanded absolute silence unless spoken to. On this particular morning, his business partner, a man named Marcus Thorne with a smug grin and cruel eyes, was present. Marcus seemed to delight in wielding borrowed power, and his gaze landed on Cynthia, who was quietly standing by the wall, waiting for the meeting to conclude so she could clean the room. It was a setup for a truly ugly moment. "Frank, is this the level of service you're accepting now?" Marcus boomed, pointing a manicured finger at Cynthia. "There's a barely visible smudge on that window. For the salary you pay, I'd expect perfection, not this." The air grew thick with tension. Every staff member froze, their eyes darting between the humiliated cleaning lady and the powerful owner. It was a triviality, a power play designed to embarrass a subordinate and impress his friend, the cold millionaire. All eyes were on Cynthia, expecting her to shrink, to apologize, to crumble. Frank himself watched with a detached curiosity, his face an unreadable mask. But Cynthia Jordan didn't crumble. She held Marcus's gaze, her spine straight, her expression calm. There was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet, unshakable dignity. She didn't speak immediately, letting the weight of his arrogance hang in the air and suffocate itself. It was a masterclass in silent defiance. Then, with a voice that was soft but clear, she responded, "You are absolutely right, sir. Perfection is the goal." She paused, then added, "My mother used to say that a person's true character is revealed not by the perfection they demand, but by the kindness they show when faced with imperfection." Her words were not an apology, but a gentle, intelligent rebuke. She didn't defend the smudge, she dismantled his entire attack with grace. The room was stunned into silence. Marcus was momentarily speechless, his face flushing with anger. Had expected a mouse and found a lioness disguised in a cleaning lady's uniform. Frank's expression shifted just for a second. A flicker of something surprise, interest, crossed his features before the mask of indifference slipped back into place. He said nothing, simply waving a dismissive hand at Marcus to drop the subject, but the seed had been planted. He had witnessed an unexpected show of strength. Cynthia simply gave a small, respectful nod and returned to her silent post by the wall. But everything had changed. She hadn't just cleaned a smudge, she had polished the mirror of integrity and forced everyone in that room to look at their own reflection. The staff saw a hero, Marcus saw a threat, and Frank Perkins, for the very first time, saw more than just a uniform. He saw a woman of substance, and he was intrigued. Later that week, walking down a service hallway he rarely used, Frank Perkins overheard hushed voices from the staff kitchen. Normally, he would ignore such chatter, dismissing it as irrelevant noise. But he caught a name, Cynthia Jordan, and paused, his curiosity piqued by the morning's events. He stood just out of sight, an invisible owner listening to the secret heartbeat of his own home. What he heard was not gossip, but quiet admiration, a testament to the woman he had barely noticed. "Did you see her stand up to Mr. Thorne?" one of the cooks whispered. "I've never seen anyone do that. He looked like a fool." Another voice, one of the younger gardeners, chimed in. "That's nothing. Did you know she's been giving half her lunch to Maria every day? She found out Maria was skipping meals to send more money home to her family." This revelation hung in the air, a simple act of profound kindness that resonated deeper than any business deal. Frank leaned against the cool wall, the words washing over him. This was a side of his world he never saw, a current of humanity flowing right under his nose. The cleaning lady, the one his partner had tried to humiliate, was secretly performing acts of selfless kindness. She wasn't seeking recognition or praise, she was doing it because it was in her nature. It was a heart-aching detail that didn't fit with his black and white view of the world, where everyone acted out of self-interest. This new information created a dissonance in his mind. The woman with the sharp intellect who could calmly dismantle an arrogant executive was the same woman who would quietly share her food with a struggling colleague. It was a combination of strength and softness that was entirely foreign to him. His world was filled with people who were either strong and cruel or kind and weak. Cynthia was an emotional paradox, a plot twist in his predictable daily narrative. His curiosity morphed into a quiet obsession. He started to watch her, not overtly, but through quick glances as she worked. He noticed the gentle way she'd move a stray photograph back into place, the focused look in her eyes as she polished the banister. He was looking for clues, trying to solve the puzzle of Cynthia Jordan. Who was this woman who moved with such quiet integrity through his loud, empty life? A surprise feeling of respect started to grow. He didn't connect it to his secret past, not yet. The memories were still buried too deep. But for the first time in years, he was genuinely interested in another human being. Not for what they could do for him, but for who they were. The cleaning lady was no longer invisible. She was an enigma, and Frank Perkins, the man who thought he knew everything, found himself utterly captivated by the mystery. He needed to know more. It was late one evening when Cynthia was tasked with deep cleaning Frank's private study, a room that felt like the heart of his lonely kingdom. As she dusted his massive mahogany desk, she noticed it was a mess of controlled chaos, piles of documents, scattered pens, and a collection of blueprints. Her hands moved almost on their own, a muscle memory from a life she rarely allowed herself to remember. She began to organize the clutter, not just tidily, but in a very specific, peculiar way. She placed his pens in a neat row, from longest to shortest, on the left side. She stacked the papers not in a single pile, but in 3 distinct, slightly overlapping stacks, fanned out so he could see the top page of each. A heavy paperweight, a silver eagle, was placed not on the papers, but just above them, like a silent guardian. It was a system born of childhood necessity, a way she had once organized his school projects in the library to keep the bullies from scattering them. When Frank entered the study hours later, he stopped dead in his tracks. His eyes fell upon the desk, and a strange, unsettling feeling washed over him, a powerful wave of déjà vu. It was so intense it made the hairs on his arms stand up. The arrangement was right. It was illogical, inefficient by his current standards, yet it felt profoundly correct, as if his brain had been waiting for things to be in this exact order. It was a surprise that rattled his usually unshakable composure. He ran his fingers over the fanned-out papers, a forgotten sensation tingling at the edge of his consciousness. Who had done this? The regular evening cleaner was meticulous but never rearranged his things. It had to be the new one, Cynthia. But how could she possibly know? It wasn't just organized, it was organized in a way that spoke a forgotten language to his soul. It was a key turning in a lock he didn't even know existed. The millionaire owner, a man who dealt in facts and figures, was suddenly confronted with a feeling he couldn't quantify. It was an emotional echo from a distant, secret past. He didn't have the memory, not the full picture, but he had the feeling, the ghost of a sensation. It was like hearing the first few notes of a song you once loved, but can no longer name. The melody was faint but undeniably there, a heart-aching and mysterious tune. He sat down at his desk, not to work, but to simply stare at the peculiar arrangement. The feeling of being protected, of someone understanding the chaos in his mind and gently ordering it for him, was overwhelming. It was a kindness he hadn't felt in decades. The puzzle of Cynthia Jordan had just gained a new, far more personal piece. It was no longer just about her character, it was now, somehow, about him. And that scared him more than any boardroom battle. Marcus Thorne had not forgotten his public humiliation at the hands of a mere cleaning lady. His arrogance, wounded by her grace, had curdled into a venomous need for revenge. He saw the flicker of interest in Frank's eyes when he looked at Cynthia, and it fueled his paranoia. He decided to eliminate the problem, to swat the fly that had dared to challenge him. He devised a cruel and simple plan, a plot twist designed to destroy her credibility and get her thrown out of the estate for good. He waited for the perfect opportunity. Knowing Frank was about to close a sensitive merger, Marcus took a key document, a page of financial projections, and slipped it into Cynthia's cleaning cart, hiding it beneath a stack of fresh towels. He then stormed into Frank's study, his face a mask of manufactured panic and outrage. "Frank, we have a serious problem. The confidential annex from the Sterling proposal is missing from my briefcase," he announced, his voice filled with false urgency. "It was here, on this table, just an hour ago," Marcus lied, gesturing wildly. "The only person who has been in and out of this wing is your new cleaning lady. She must have taken it. She's probably selling it to our competitors as we speak." The accusation was explosive, a direct assault on the integrity Frank was just beginning to admire. Marcus was banking on Frank's inherent mistrust, his tendency to believe the worst in people. He was trying to frame an innocent woman. He pressed his advantage, his voice dripping with condescending concern. "Frank, you can't have a thief on your staff, especially with access to your most private spaces. Think of the risk. You need to fire her immediately. Let me call security and have them search her belongings. We'll find it, I guarantee you." He was painting Cynthia as a corporate spy disguised in a cleaning uniform, a narrative that played into the world of deceit they both inhabited. He wanted her not just fired, but utterly humiliated. Cynthia was summoned to the study. She entered quietly, her hands folded calmly in front of her, and was met with the full force of Marcus's accusation and Frank's cold, scrutinizing gaze. She could see the missing document peeking out from her cart, a plant so obvious it was almost insulting. Her heart sank, not with fear, but with a deep emotional weariness. The world, it seemed, was always full of bullies, whether in the schoolyard or in a millionaire's mansion. Frank looked at her, his expression unreadable. Every instinct, honed by years of corporate betrayals, told him to believe Marcus. An employee is disposable, a partner is an asset. The evidence, circumstantial as it was, pointed to her. The pressure from Marcus was immense. It was the ultimate test. Would he revert to the cold, calculating owner who cut his losses without a second thought? Or would the seed of doubt about Cynthia's true character be enough to make him pause? In that suffocatingly tense room, Cynthia Jordan did not panic. She didn't plead or cry or deny the accusation. To do so would be to play Marcus's game, to appear as the hysterical, guilty cleaning lady he was painting her as. Instead, a profound calm settled over her. She looked not at the damning document in her cart, but directly at Marcus, her eyes holding his with an unnerving placidity. Her silence was her first line of defense, a shield of quiet dignity that immediately threw him off balance. Then she turned her gaze to Frank, addressing him with a level of respect that subtly excluded Marcus from the conversation. "Mr. Perkins," she began, her voice steady and clear, "may I ask Mr. Thorne a single question?" Her request was so unexpected, so contrary to how a guilty person should act, that Frank found himself nodding, intrigued despite the gravity of the situation. He was witnessing another surprise from this enigmatic woman, another layer of her character. Cynthia's eyes returned to Marcus. "Sir, you said the document went missing from your briefcase on this table within the last hour, correct?" Marcus, puffed up with confidence, sneered. "That's right. And you were the only one here." Cynthia gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod, her focus unwavering. "That is interesting," she said softly, "because I saw the house manager bring your briefcase up from your car only 10 minutes ago. It hasn't been in this room for an hour." The room fell into a deafening silence. It was a simple factual observation, but it shattered Marcus's timeline. It was a checkmate delivered with the soft-spoken precision of a grandmaster. She didn't accuse him of planting the evidence she didn't have to. She simply presented an undeniable truth that exposed the lie at the heart of his story. Her sharp intellect had cut through his clumsy deceit like a razor, leaving him exposed and sputtering. She had used logic as her weapon. A powerful seed of doubt was planted in Frank's mind, and it began to grow instantly. He remembered Marcus's earlier attempt to humiliate her, his petty cruelty. He remembered the staff's whispers of her kindness and integrity. The two pictures didn't align. A woman who shares her lunch with the needy doesn't suddenly become a corporate spy. The accusation now felt hollow, a poorly constructed frame that was falling apart under the weight of a single intelligent question. Cynthia said nothing more. She had presented the facts and now stood waiting, her fate in the hands of the owner of the house. She had protected her own honor not with an emotional defense, but with irrefutable logic. This display of quiet strength was more compelling to Frank than any tearful denial. He looked from his sputtering red-faced partner to the calm, resolute cleaning lady. For the first time, he wasn't just doubting the accusation, he was doubting the man he called his partner. Frank dismissed them both from his study with a curt, unreadable command, leaving him alone with the echoes of accusation and the quiet power of Cynthia's defense. His mind was a battlefield. His loyalty to Marcus, a partner of 5 years, warred with the undeniable logic of Cynthia's point and the integrity he had begun to see in her. The man who always trusted his gut now found his gut torn in two. He needed more than feelings, he needed cold, hard proof. Driven by this gnawing uncertainty, he did something he rarely did. He pulled up the security footage from the mansion's discreet cameras himself. He didn't delegate it, this was too personal. He started with the hallway outside his study. He fast-forwarded through the quiet hours, his jaw tightening as he watched. And then he saw it. Clear as day, Marcus Thorne, looking over his shoulder like a common thief, slipping the document from his own briefcase into Cynthia's unattended cart. The betrayal hit Frank like a physical blow. It wasn't just that Marcus had lied, he had tried to destroy an innocent person for his own petty ego. He had brought this ugliness, this cheap corporate backstabbing, into Frank's home. The disgust rose in his throat, thick and bitter. He had built his empire with this man, trusted him, and it was all a lie. The man he thought was his right hand was nothing more than a snake. It was a painful, but necessary, redemption from his own poor judgment. But Frank didn't stop the footage there. The seed of curiosity about Cynthia urged him to keep watching. He rewound the footage to earlier in the day, to the staff kitchen, remembering the conversation had overheard. He watched as Cynthia sat down to eat, and then he saw Maria, the young kitchen hand, walk by with nothing. He watched as Cynthia subtly, without any fanfare, broke her sandwich in half and slid it across the table to the girl, offering a warm, reassuring smile. Witnessing that act of pure, unadulterated kindness was more impactful than seeing Marcus's betrayal. It was a quiet, heart-aching moment of grace that no one was ever meant to see. It wasn't a performance, it was her true character shining through when no one was watching. This was the real Cynthia Jordan. The woman who stood up to a bully with her intellect was the same woman who fought another's hunger with her compassion. It was a beautiful, emotional truth. He finally had his proof. The security footage had not only revealed his partner's deceit, but had also validated every instinct Head had about Cynthia. She was a woman of silent strength and profound goodness. The contrast between Marcus's vile act and her gentle one was stark and unforgiving. Frank Perkins, the cold millionaire, felt a forgotten warmth spread through his chest. He now knew who was the liability and who was the true asset in his life. The next morning, the air in Frank's study was glacial. He had summoned Marcus, who walked in with the same smug confidence as the day before, clearly expecting to hear that Cynthia had been fired and disgraced. He saw the tablet on Frank's desk and assumed it was related to their merger. He had no idea he was walking into his own execution. Frank didn't offer him a seat. He simply stood by the window, his back to Marcus, a silhouette of impending judgment. "I reviewed the security footage," Frank said, his voice dangerously calm, the words cutting through the silence. He turned around, his eyes as hard as chips of ice. Marcus's smirk faltered, a flicker of panic dawning in his eyes. Frank tapped the screen of the tablet, and the damning video began to play Marcus, furtive and guilty, planting the document. He let the entire clip play in excruciating silence, the only sound being the faint, tinny audio of Marcus's treachery. "You brought your petty games into my home." Frank's voice was low, seething with a controlled rage. "You tried to destroy an innocent person to soothe your pathetic, wounded ego. A person, I might add, who has shown more integrity in 1 week than you have in the 5 years I've known you." He was disgusted, not just by the deceit, but by his own blindness to it. The foundation of his inner circle was rotten, and he had been oblivious, a powerful owner who couldn't see the poison in his own court. Marcus sputtered, trying to formulate an excuse, a justification. "Frank, you have to understand, she disrespected me. I was teaching her a lesson, for your own good." But the words came out hollow and weak. He had been caught, his ugliness laid bare, and there was no escape. Frank looked at him with utter contempt. The man before him was a parasite, and he had finally been exposed to the light. The time for redemption was long past for Marcus Thorne. "Get out," Frank said, the 2 words landing with the finality of a guillotine. "Your partnership is terminated. Your access is revoked. If I ever see your face again, it will be in a courtroom." There was no negotiation, no room for argument. It was a swift, clean cut. As Marcus scrambled out of the room, humiliated and broken, Frank felt not triumph, but a profound sense of cleansing. He had excised a cancer from his life. In the aftermath, amidst the debris of a shattered partnership, one thought remained crystal clear in Frank's mind: Cynthia's silent strength. She had faced a career-ending accusation without flinching. She had trusted in the truth, using her intelligence rather than hysterics. She had a fortitude he hadn't seen in anyone, a quiet power that was far more impressive than Marcus's loud, empty bravado. She had weathered the storm, and he was left in awe of her resilience. With Marcus gone, a strange quiet settled over the mansion and over Frank's mind. The drama was over, but something had been dislodged, a stone thrown into the deep, still waters of his memory. He found himself replaying the confrontation in his head, not Marcus's deceit, but Cynthia's poise. Her calmness under fire, her fierce, quiet dignity. And that's when it happened. A flicker, a spark in the darkness of his forgotten childhood. It wasn't a full memory, but a sudden visceral flash of emotion: fear. The specific, stomach-churning fear of a small boy surrounded by bigger, crueler boys in a schoolyard. He could almost smell the damp earth, feel the rough hands shoving him. The image was blurry, but the feeling was intensely real. A stolen lunch. Taunting laughter. And then another feeling pushed through the fear, a surge of defiance. But it wasn't his defiance. It belonged to someone else. It was the memory of a fierce young girl, her pigtails flying, planting her small body in front of his. A girl with fire in her eyes, standing up for him when no one else would. He couldn't see her face clearly, not yet, but he could hear her voice, a high, determined shout that scattered the bullies like startled birds. She had been his protector. This wasn't just a vague recollection, it was a deeply emotional, heart-aching echo from his secret past. Suddenly, his perception of Cynthia Jordan shifted entirely. He was no longer just impressed by her, he was searching her. He started watching her with a new, intense focus, not as an owner observing an employee, but as an archaeologist carefully dusting off a priceless artifact. He looked for clues, for any sign of the girl from his fragmented memory. Was it in the determined set of her jaw? The unwavering clarity in her eyes? The way she had stood up to Marcus, it was the same energy, the same quiet courage, the same instinct to stand for what was right, regardless of the personal cost. He started to connect the dots, not with logic, but with a deep, resonant intuition. Could it be? Could this graceful, intelligent woman be the same scrappy, heroic girl who had been his only defender in a world that seemed determined to break him? It felt like an impossible plot twist, a fantasy. He felt a desperate, aching need to know. The millionaire who had everything was suddenly consumed by a single question. The mystery of Cynthia Jordan had become the mystery of his own past. He was searching for the hero he had long since forgotten, the one who had taught him his first lesson in courage. His obsession was no longer about her character, it was about his own salvation, his own story. He had to find a way to make her reveal herself. Frank knew he couldn't just ask her. The question was too monumental, too insane. "Excuse me, were you my childhood protector?" It would shatter the delicate, unspoken respect that had formed between them. He needed a catalyst, a key to unlock the past without forcing the door. He devised a plan, a simple test rooted in emotion, not logic. He went to his safe and retrieved the one object that truly mattered to him, a small, silver-framed photograph of his parents, taken shortly before they died. It was his most cherished possession, the only tangible link to a time when he felt unconditionally loved. The next morning, as Cynthia was cleaning the main hall, he walked past, feigning a clumsy stumble. The photograph slipped from his hand, clattering onto the marble floor. The glass didn't shatter, but a fine crack appeared in the corner. "Damn it," he muttered, loud enough for her to hear, before taking a staged, urgent phone call and walking away, leaving the photo on the floor as bait. He watched from his security monitor, his heart pounding with an anxiety he hadn't felt in years. He saw Cynthia approach. She didn't just pick it up. She knelt, her movements gentle and reverent. She saw the crack and the smudge of dust, and her expression softened with a deep, innate empathy. She took a soft cloth from her cart and, with the care of a museum curator, she polished the glass, her fingers carefully avoiding the crack. It was an act of profound respect. A few minutes later, she appeared at the door of his study, the photograph held carefully in her hands. She didn't look nervous or intimidated. She simply looked like a person returning something important to its rightful owner. "Mr. Perkins," she said quietly, holding it out to him. "I found this in the hall. The glass is slightly cracked, but the picture is safe." He took it from her, their fingers brushing for a fleeting, electric moment. He looked at the photo, then at her, his eyes searching for the answer he so desperately needed. "Thank you, Cynthia," he said, his voice softer than he intended. She simply nodded, about to turn and leave, but she paused at the door. "It's a beautiful picture," she said, her voice filled with a genuine warmth that melted some of the ice around his heart. Then she delivered the line that would change everything. "You should protect what is priceless." Those words, they hit him with the force of a tidal wave. They were so simple, yet so specific, so resonant. It wasn't just advice, it was an echo. A phrase plucked directly from the deepest, most guarded vault of his memory. He stood frozen, the photograph feeling heavy in his hand, as a final crucial piece of the puzzle slammed into place. The déjà vu was gone, replaced by a dawning, heart-shattering certainty. He was so close to remembering everything. "You should protect what is priceless." The sentence echoed in the silent study, reverberating not in his ears, but in his soul. It was the key, the final key. The world around Frank Perkins dissolved, the mahogany desk, the city skyline, all of it melting away, replaced by the faded, sun-drenched memory of a dusty schoolyard. The smell of chalk dust and cut grass filled his senses. The memory, once a blurry flash, came into sharp, agonizing focus. A complete, emotional recall. He was 10 years old again, clutching a diorama of the solar system he had spent weeks building. It was his masterpiece. A group of older boys had cornered him, their shadows looming over him. They were about to smash it, to destroy the one thing he was proud of, to humiliate him once again. He remembered the helpless, burning tears in his eyes. He had been so alone, so utterly defenseless. A perfect target for their casual cruelty. And then she appeared. A whirlwind of righteous fury in a faded dress and scuffed shoes. It was Cynthia Jordan, her face smudged with dirt, her pigtails askew. She had planted herself between him and the bullies, her small arms outstretched as if she could shield his entire world. One of the bullies had sneered, "It's just a stupid project." And that's when Shed said it. Her child's voice, ringing with a wisdom far beyond her years. "You should protect what is priceless." The connection was instant and absolute. The fierce girl in his memory and the graceful woman standing in his doorway were one and the same. It was her. It had always been her. The shock of recognition was so profound it left him breathless. It wasn't just a surprise or a plot twist, it was a seismic shift in his reality. The protector of his childhood had been silently walking the halls of his home, and he had been completely, arrogantly blind. He finally remembered. Every strange feeling, every moment of déjà vu, every bit of admiration Head felt for her suddenly made perfect sense. It wasn't a new feeling, it was a rediscovered one. The respect he felt for her now was built on the foundation of the awe he felt for her then. The kindness he had seen in her was the same kindness that had saved him decades ago. Destiny hadn't just brought her back into his life. It had been waiting for him to be worthy of her again. He looked up from the photograph, his eyes locking with hers. For the first time, he truly saw her. Not the cleaning lady, not the enigmatic employee, but Cynthia. His Cynthia. the hero of his secret past. A wave of indescribable emotion washed over him: gratitude, shame, wonder. How could he have forgotten someone who had marked his soul so deeply? He knew, in that heart-stopping moment, that his life would never, ever be the same. The revelation settled over Frank not like a storm, but like the quiet, profound clarity that follows one. He looked around his opulent study, at the awards on the shelves, the symbols of his success, and saw them for what they were: hollow trophies. For years, he had been searching for something real in a world of artifice. Had looked for loyalty in boardrooms, for honesty in contracts, and for integrity in people who, like Marcus, only mirrored his own cynical ambition. He had been searching in all the wrong places. All this time, the very qualities he craved: genuine kindness, unshakable integrity, quiet strength had been right here, under his own roof. They weren't found in a business partner or a lover from his own social class. They were embodied in his cleaning lady. The irony was so thick he could taste it. He, the great millionaire owner, had been so blind, so caught up in the pursuit of more, that he couldn't recognize true wealth when it was polishing his silverware. He thought back to every interaction: her graceful handling of Marcus's humiliation, her silent sharing of a meal, her reverent care for his parents' photo. These weren't isolated incidents, they were the very fabric of her being. She was the real deal. In a life filled with calculated gestures and transactional relationships, Cynthia was a beacon of authenticity. She was the living, breathing embodiment of the values his parents had tried to teach him before they were gone. This realization sparked a deep and painful self-reflection. Who had he become? He was a man who had almost allowed this incredible woman to be framed and fired over the word of a snake like Marcus. He had been so isolated by his power that he had nearly cast out the only person who had ever truly protected him. The shame of it was a physical weight, a crushing burden on his chest. It was the beginning of his redemption, and it was excruciating. He understood now that his quest for a perfect, controlled life had been a fool's errand. Perfection wasn't about flawless windows or soaring profits. It was about character. It was about having people in your life who would tell you the truth, who would act with honor even when no one was watching. He had been starving for something real, and Cynthia was a feast for his famished soul. It was a heart-aching and deeply humbling epiphany. The great Frank Perkins, the man who could buy and sell companies before breakfast, finally understood. The greatest asset he had ever encountered was not a balance sheet. It wasn't a stock or a building or a patent. It was the quiet, unassuming cleaning lady with a secret past and a heart full of the very virtues he had spent his entire adult life desperately and fruitlessly searching for. The search was over. She was right here. A few days later, Frank hosted a small, exclusive gathering of investors at his estate. It was the usual crowd: men and women dressed in designer clothes, their laughter as artificial as the sweetener in their drinks. As Cynthia moved silently through the room, offering hors d'oeuvres, Frank watched the scene with his new, opened eyes. He was no longer a part of their world, he was an observer, and what he saw disgusted him. He was a millionaire watching other millionaires reveal their true poverty of character. He saw two of his oldest associates, a husband and wife duo known for their philanthropy, watch Cynthia walk away. The wife leaned into her husband and whispered, a cruel smirk on her lips, "Can you imagine having to spend your life scrubbing other people's floors? It's so tragic." The husband chuckled, a low, condescending sound. "Well, someone has to do it. Just try not to make eye contact, darling." It encouraged them to talk to you. They were mocking her, humiliating her with their casual disdain. In the past, Frank would not have noticed. Or if he had, he would have dismissed it as the meaningless chatter of the elite. But now, their words were like acid. He saw them for what they truly were: ugly. Their expensive clothes, their perfect smiles, their polished manner, it was all a thin veneer over a core of rotten arrogance. They judged a person's worth by their bank account and their job title, completely blind to the content of their character. They were the real tragedies. He then looked at Cynthia. She was wearing her simple uniform, her hair tied back neatly, her hands probably rough from cleaning chemicals. And yet, she was the most beautiful person in that room. Her beauty wasn't in her appearance, it was in her quiet dignity, her unwavering grace in the face of their silent contempt. She moved through their world of ugliness like a beam of light, untouched and pure. It was an emotional, defining moment for him. The contrast was staggering. His friends were hollow shells, defined by what they owned. Cynthia was a whole universe defined by who she was. They were takers, parasites who fed on the labor of people they deemed beneath them. She was a giver, a protector, a woman of substance. The love story here wasn't romantic. Not yet. It was a story about Frank falling in love with true human decency, a quality he saw perfectly embodied in her. He felt a cold, hard resolve settle in his chest. He was done. He was done with these people, with their superficiality, their casual cruelty. He had been living in a beautifully decorated prison with them for years, and Cynthia had just handed him the key. The stage was set for a final dramatic plot twist. He knew what he had to do. It was time to choose a side, to burn down the old world and build a new one on a foundation of genuine worth. The next day, Frank convened an emergency board meeting. The stakes were high, the air thick with tension. His most senior executives and remaining partners, including a few who had been at the party the night before, sat around the long polished table. They expected a discussion about the failed merger. They were not prepared for the revolution that was about to take place. The owner of the company was about to rewrite the entire corporate ethos in one fell swoop. In the middle of the tense silence, Frank pressed a button on his intercom. "Cynthia, could you please come to the boardroom?" A wave of confusion washed over the room. A cleaning lady? In a board meeting? They exchanged condescending, bewildered glances. Cynthia entered, her expression calm but questioning. Frank pulled out a chair for her at the head of the table, an act of respect so profound that it left the board members speechless. This was a surprise no one saw coming. "Gentlemen," Frank began, his voice ringing with an authority they had never heard before. "For the past week, I have been given a masterclass in character, integrity, and courage. Not from anyone in this room, but from this woman, Miss Cynthia Jordan." He then proceeded to tell them everything. He played the video of Marcus planting the document, exposing the deceit that had run through the company's veins. The board was stunned, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning horror. "But that's not the most important thing I learned," Frank continued, his voice thick with emotion. He looked directly at Cynthia, his eyes filled with a gratitude that was almost reverent. "Decades ago, when I was a boy with nothing, this woman and a girl stood up to a group of bullies for me. She protected me when I couldn't protect myself. She taught me my first and most important lesson about courage." The revelation hung in the air, a heart-aching and powerful truth. He then turned to the board. "We've been measuring success all wrong. We look at profits, at growth, at ruthlessness. But the greatest asset a person or a company can have is character." He pointed a finger at the empty chair that once belonged to Marcus. "That is the result of a lack of character, deceit, betrayal." He then gestured to Cynthia. "And this is the result of its presence. Strength, honor, loyalty. It was the ultimate redemption for both him and her." "Therefore," Frank announced, his voice booming with finality, "I am creating a new position. Personal advisor to the chairman. Someone to be the moral compass of this company, to ensure we never value profit over people again." He looked at Cynthia, a genuine smile finally reaching his eyes. "And I have offered the position to Miss Cynthia Jordan." The board sat in stunned silence, witnessing not a corporate takeover, but the takeover of kindness in a world that had forgotten it. And so, our story comes to a close. From a forgotten memory in a grand estate to a revolution of kindness in a corporate boardroom, we've witnessed a powerful journey of redemption. It's a heart-aching reminder that true value isn't measured in dollars, but in dignity, and that the strongest person in the room is often the one who leads with kindness. Frank and Cynthia's love story, born from a childhood promise, proves that destiny never forgets, even when we do. Their story shows that sometimes you have to lose everything you think you want to finally find everything you've ever needed. We truly hope this story resonated with you and served as a reminder of the quiet heroes all around us. Now we would love to hear your thoughts on this emotional journey. Please, take a moment to give this video a like if it touched your heart, and share with us in the comments below, what was the one moment in this story that impacted you the most? Was it when she stood up to the arrogant partner, or the moment he finally remembered? Your insights are what make this community so special. We're also curious, did you expect the story to end this way? Or did you have a different finale in mind? Let us know if you were satisfied with this beautiful desfecho. And if you love stories that make you feel, think, and believe in the good in the world, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We have so many more stories for you to discover in our archives, and you won't want to miss the powerful new video we have coming for you next week. Thank you for being here with us. Ultimately, this story is a mirror. It asks us to look closer at the people who move silently through our own lives, ones who serve, clean, and support you, and to recognize the profound humanity and potential for heroism within them. Let this be a call to see people not for the roles they play, but for the character they possess. Be the person who sees the strength and kindness in others, because you never know when you might be entertaining an angel, a hero, or a long-lost friend.